Story recapped here. Today I'm going to explain a psychological horror film called It Comes at Night. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. A highly contagious disease has wiped out most of humanity. Sarah, Paul, and their son Travis hide in a cottage in the woods to escape the plague. When Sarah's father, Bud, starts showing symptoms of the disease, Sarah says goodbye to him before letting her husband and son take him to the woods. There, Paul sets his father-in-law down. After saying their goodbyes, Paul covers Bud's face with a pillow and shoots him on the head. Paul pushes the body on a shallow grave before burning it. That evening, Travis secretly listens to his parents' conversation. Sarah laments that Travis shouldn't have been there to witness his grandfather's death, but Paul insists that he needed Travis's help. Paul is optimistic that he can protect his family from this disease. But the grieving Sarah is losing hope. Not wanting to hear more, Travis heads to his bedroom to sleep. He reminisces as he looks at his grandfather's picture. Travis walks down the hallway, seeing their family photos on the wall. He reaches a red door and opens it. Inside, plastic sheets cover the windows and door. He sees Bud sitting on a bed, huddled over and struggling to breathe. When he gets closer, Bud straightens up and screams, blood pouring from his mouth. Sarah shakes her son awake, panicked. There's an intruder in the house. Downstairs, Paul keeps their dog, Stanley, from rushing to the intruder. Sarah and Travis join them, wearing gas masks and gloves. Paul aims his gun forward, shining a light on their path. They reach the same hallway in Travis's dream. Someone is beyond the red door, alarming the family. Paul crouches, aiming at the door, with Sarah as his backup. The door breaks open, and Paul pulls the trigger. The man on the other side staggers back. Paul rushes in, cornering the intruder, Will, and demanding him to put down his gun. Will surrenders his firearm, and Paul inspects Will's eyes to make sure he's not sick. After confirming that Will is alone, Paul knocks him out with the back of his gun. Paul inspects the man's belongings and sees an open window. He then checks the perimeter, ensuring that no one else is around while Sarah and Travis watch Will. That morning, they take the unconscious Will into the woods to quarantine him. They tie him to a tree and put duct tape over his mouth. Then, the family fortifies their home to prevent anyone else from coming in. Will finally wakes up, finding a bag over his head. He tries to yell and struggle free, but to no avail. Everyone at home hears his muffled cries. Sarah is disturbed by what they had to do. Travis hugs Stanley to help him sleep through the night. At night, Travis walks outside, following Will's muffled cries. Instead, he sees Will with blackened eyes staring down at him. He wakes up, disturbed by the image. On the following day, Travis watches from a hole in the wall as his father interrogates Will. Paul checks for any signs of infection before removing his mask. He offers the other a jug of water in return for some honesty. Finally, he removes the duct tape, allowing the man to speak. Will confesses that he thought the house was abandoned, so he went in and looked for supplies. He reveals that he has a family who's waiting for him to get more food and water. Paul presses for more information, unconvinced. Will says that he and his family stayed with his brother to avoid the disease. But when they ran out of clean water, Will took his family into the woods. Will negotiates a trade, telling Paul that he has enough food to trade for clean water. Will's family managed to keep healthy goats and chickens to supply them with food. Knowing that their supply will run out, Paul considers it. The family discusses the situation inside their home. Sarah figured that Will must have followed the smoke from when they burned her father's body, doubting that he believed the house was abandoned. Despite their doubts, however, Sarah suggests bringing Will's family back into their home. Paul argues that it's too risky. But Will already knows their location, so Sarah argues that it's wiser to include them in their home to help protect it. Paul decides that he'll wait with Will's family for 3 days to ensure that they're not sick before bringing them in. Paul takes Will with him to collect his family. Will sits at the back of the truck, giving Paul directions. There's unease between them, but they press on. The sound of gunfire causes Paul to swerve off the road. Paul climbs out of the car and hides under the vehicle with his gun in hand. A stranger emerges out of the woods, and Paul shoots him. He gets out, seeing Will beat another man. Paul finishes the man with his gun, but Will disagrees with his actions. Paul suspects that Will knew the men. He denies it, reasoning that they could have gained information from the men. Paul considers this, realizing that Will may be right. Paul helps Will clean up, then checks if the men were sick. Once confirming that they're not, they hide the bodies and fix the truck. Paul looks back at the men before they leave. Days later, Paul finally returns with Will and his family. He introduces Will's wife, Kim, and their son, Andrew. The family helps the newcomers settle in, teaching them the rules they've been using to stay safe, such as keeping the front and back door locked at all times and never going out alone. In the evening, Travis goes to the attic to eavesdrop on the newcomers. Kim and Will joke around while in bed with their son playing nearby. The two families grow closer together as the days go by. Will teaches Travis how to chop firewood while Sarah and Kim help each other to maintain their home. They find a sense of a normal life amidst the troubles of the outside world. One evening, Travis dreams about hearing Kim and Will make love. He wakes up to find Kim sitting by his bed. She kisses him, and black liquid spills from her mouth, pouring on his lips. Travis huddles over the sink as if spitting the liquid out. Looking at the mirror, he ponders over the dreams he's been having. Travis climbs down the stairs and sees Kim by herself in the kitchen. Both he and Kim couldn't sleep, so they decided to talk. The two share stories, but when Kim starts talking about Will, Travis feels awkward and decides to go back to bed. In the morning, the three men gather firewood when Paul catches his son, Travis, watching Kim collect water. Paul reminds him that they still can't trust anyone else but their own family. Stanley starts barking at something in the woods. Paul tells his son to go back inside and let him handle it, but Stanley bites Paul, accidentally releasing him. Travis chases after his dog, who rushes into the woods. Despite Stanley's consistent barking, Travis doesn't see him. The barks turn into whines before suddenly stopping. Will finds Travis, who points to where he last heard the dog. Paul reaches them, furious that his son went into the woods by himself. He insists the two go back to the house, arguing that Stanley knows the woods and can get home by himself. That evening, seeing that his son is still worried, Paul assures that Stanley will find his way back home. When Travis isn't convinced, Paul promises to start looking for the dog in the morning. Paul invites Will for a drink in Bud's old room. The two talk about life before the sickness. When Will mentions that he was an only child, Paul recalls Will's story about staying in his brother's house before leaving the city. Will corrects himself, saying that it was his brother-in-law's house that they stayed in before. Tension fills the air. Paul is not entirely convinced but decides to drop it and leave. Later that night, Travis gets out of bed, unable to sleep again. He follows a moaning in the dark and finds Andrew asleep on the floor of Bud's room. Travis wakes him up and takes him back to their bedroom, where Andrew climbs back to bed with his parents. Travis lingers to watch the family together before heading back. Another sound catches his attention. He climbs down the stairs cautiously. He reaches the hallway and sees the red door open. A loud crash makes Travis jump. He rushes to his dad, waking him up. With gas masks on and gun in hand, Paul and Will investigate and find Stanley wounded and moaning in pain. The two come back inside, delivering the news to their families. Travis insists on seeing his dog, but Paul argues with him. Sarah takes Travis to the living room while Paul and Will put the dog out of its misery. Later that evening, the family have a discussion. Travis tells the others that the door was already open before he went downstairs. He suggests that it may have been Andrew who opened it, recounting how he found the boy sleeping in Bud's bedroom before taking him back to his parents. Kim asks her son about what happened, but Andrew doesn't remember anything. Kim and Will try to poke holes in Travis' story, and this causes tension between the two families. Paul suggests that they should stay in each other's bedrooms for a few days, in case someone is infected. The others agree, taking in enough water and rations into their rooms. In their bedroom, Travis confesses that he held Andrew's hands when he brought him back to his parents that night. Travis is broken up, both about Stanley and the possibility of getting sick from having contact with Andrew. Travis dreams about going to the red door again and leaving the house. He follows barking into the woods. Picking up a gun from the ground, he searches for Stanley. The barks grow louder, turning into growls. His eyes widen in fear as he watches Stanley fight off an unseen wild animal. Travis wakes up, vomiting black liquid. He stares at the mess in his arms before lifting his eyes to the figure before him. Bud breathes heavily in front of him, black liquid dripping from his mouth. Travis wakes again, catching a glimpse of sores on his arms. He scrubs it away before realizing that it was just his imagination. His arms are normal, and his hands are clean. He takes a breath of relief until he hears Andrew's cries from outside. Travis leaves the room and crawls into the attic to eavesdrop on the other family. Andrew continues to cry. Kim and Will are distraught, talking about leaving the house. Travis goes back to their room and tells his parents what he heard, suggesting that Andrew might be sick. Paul and Sarah put their protective gear on, telling Travis that if Kim and Will leave, they may take their food and water. Travis argues that they can share, but Paul reminds him that people can get desperate, while Sarah tells him that they still don't know the other family, so they can't risk it. Travis tells them that if Andrew is sick, then he might be too. Sarah tries to convince her son that it isn't the case. Armed, Sarah and Paul go to the other bedroom to check on them. Paul convinces Will to let him in, reminding him that it's their house. Will finally opens the door, asking where Sarah and Travis are. Paul lies, saying they're both in the room. Hearing this, Will aims a gun at Paul's head and takes his gun. Held at gunpoint, Paul goes into a corner of the room. Will demands he removes his mask, then tells Andrew to keep his eyes closed. Will announces that they'll take their share of food and water, promising that they will never see them again. With Paul as his captive, Will gets his family out of the room. As they climb down the stairs, Sarah comes out, aiming her gun at Will. Will repeats his plan to Sarah, then suggests for both of them to lower their weapons. But when they do, Paul steals the gun from Will and knocks him down. Kim and Andrew reach the door, but Sarah corners them. Kim puts Andrew behind her, begging for Sarah to let them go. All the while, Travis hears the commotion from the bedroom, broken and torn at what their home has become. Tension continues to rise downstairs, with Paul knocking Will out after the latter insults him. Will wakes up in a wheelbarrow. Kim carries Andrew, still held at gunpoint by Sarah. When he sees Will wake up, Paul takes him off the wheelbarrow and demands him to get up. Will slams the gun off of Paul's hand and tackles him down. Travis finally gets out of the bedroom, hearing a gunshot from outside. Will beats Paul until Sarah shoots him on the back. Kim flees into the woods with Andrew. Getting up, Paul warns Kim to stop. When she doesn't, Paul fires his gun, hitting Andrew instead. Kim's cries stop everyone, including Travis, who just entered the scene. In grief and anger, Kim dares Paul to shoot her too. Paul pushes down the guilt and fires his gun at Kim, ending her agony. Will succumbs to his injuries as well. Travis is frozen in shock, seeing the chaos. His mother cries to him, but he's unresponsive. Back in the house, Travis vomits on the sink. He looks in the mirror, now sure that he's sick. One night, Travis wakes up in bed with his mother sitting at his side. Sarah comforts her son, seeing sores on his face. She mournfully tells him that it's okay for him to let go. Travis dreams of walking into the red door again. At this moment, Travis passes on. His parents are broken, losing their son despite everything that they've done. Days later, Paul and Sarah, both sick from the disease, sit at the dinner table in silence. They share a mournful look, knowing what's to come. Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.